right. Okay. Good day, everyone. Let's get down to today's topic of making network calls. And following our last class, we looked at one method of making network calls, which is not an optimized way of doing that. So I'm just going to run through the code so that we'll understand what's happening. So I come into this place, you can see it's loading and it returns the data over here. Now I'm going to do something else here. I'm going to rewrite all this code from scratch and I'm going to explain what I am doing step by step. So please, can you confirm that you're hearing me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just going to delete all this other code over here. Um, should I delete everything?
Mm, no. Yes, did everything. Just did everything.
Okay, so I'm just going to keep this our URL somewhere. I'm just typing URL instead of notepad. And we don't need this, we don't need this. So, okay, that's what's how I'm supposed to show up. I'm going to keep this one over here. And I'm just going to delete all these, all these here. And of course, we know what our init does now, Abby. I'm going to delete all this here. I'm going to delete all of this. Okay, back in Michael, who can tell me what our init function does in a stateful widget?
What's come again?
Our init function, this init function, what does it do in our stateful widget?
Our init function. Wait.
Yeah, this over here, I explained it in the last class, what it means and what it does.
It is like how do I put am? It dey initialize the state of a
Hmm.
it dey
Back in,
initialize they perform one time. I don't forget to put am. You get it yesterday. They perform one time work. Uh,
one time walk. Okay,
Okay, so make a
like
try.
one
Let
time
me
work
say my
before
own.
before the widget use for the first time.
I don't know what that means. So one time walk.
Can I go ahead?
Yeah, back in, please.
Okay, so for that in its state, every code that you're having within the init state will firstly run before any other code you are having inside your build widget.
Mm,
Yes.
mm, and you're very sure.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sure.
Our init method over there is a function that runs before our build function runs. So basically, back you got it correctly. Basically, this is the first function that runs before our build function runs. And what that means is that if we want to do any form of initialization of, variables, it can be done here before our widget builds up. So that was where Michael was getting confused a little bit with that initialization of values. It's that clear.
Yes, boss, it's clear.
Okay. Now I'm going to take this whole thing step by step. Over here, we are trying to make a network call to this URL here to get cat facts. Then we're going to display it for the user. Now, the thing about network calls is that it is an async function. And what it means is that it can take a lot of time to get the data and process the data and return the data. For network calls, there are basically three states in which a network call happens. Your first state, which is making the request. Second state is getting feedback about your request. And the third state is displaying the results of your request. Now we're going to write a code for that. Now we're going to create a function called make network call. It's going to be an async function over here. And since it's an async function and makes a network call, we are going to create a try catch block because sometimes an error might happen and we need to catch that particular error. Now, when you're making network calls, these are some things that you'll consider: sending requests, getting response about request. Okay, I think I used the wrong comment over here. The third one we're going to be processing the response, and the fourth one is displaying the response slash result of response. And the last one that you have to consider is handling failures or errors from response. Now we're going to take these things one after the other. And as we talked about in our previous class, but so far, are you guys following?
Yes, boss.
Okay.
Yes,
And
yes, sir.
okay, using our previous class here, we talked about the HTTP package, which can be used to send requests over a network and also to get feedback. Now over here, this is how we're going to do it here. var send, you can call this any, and each time you have an async function, you use your await key for the section that is going to take a long time to process. And this is it here, http.get. So we are using a get method to actually get data from our server, which is this over here, or rather our API, which is this over here. So I'm just going to paste it here. And okay, this takes in a URI, not just a string. So I'm going to cut this over here. See URI, and I'm going to pass it. We know that passing is basically conversion from one format to another. So I'm going to pass this, and you can see that it's no longer disturbing us. And over here, this is us sending a request. This is the first step. Now, the second step is getting a response about the request. And how do we do that? This is how we do it. And also, the last class we talked about how data is being gotten from the response and the format that it comes in. It comes in as a string, but we have to decode it so that it will turn into a map so we can make use of it. Now, this is it over here. Now we have our JSON data. Then we import our JSON decode. And what we are decoding, look at it, it takes in a string. And like I said some few seconds ago, all the data that we get from our back end here or from our response here comes as a string. So this decode change it to a map. Now send dot body. Inside this body parameter is where you get your response. Then we close it. This is getting a response. Getting a response about the request. Now, the next one is processing the response. Okay, so I'm going to add a caveat over here. Also, check status code. This is also part of getting a response. And again, I'm going to be referencing the last class a lot. In our last class, we talked about some popular status code. So let's Google some. 200 is usually telling you that it is okay. 404, it's missing. 503, service unavailable. 502, bad gateway. 500, internal server error. So let's open it over here. You can see the most popular ones. 200, everything is okay. 301, 302, 400, 401. Yeah, you should keep these ones in mind. A proper back-end developer will use this status code to tell you if something is wrong. And again, real world scenario doesn't always follow a perfect example, because I have come across a back end that returned 200 for me, but it was an error that is inside there. I hope you are all getting this.
Yes, boss.
Baki, what of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, this is how we can check our status code by using send. Remember, this sends a request. Dot status code over here. Now, we'll come to the processing of the data section. Now, we'll use our conditional statement that if send.status code is 200, meaning if everything is good, then we can now process our data. And
Okay.
we'll have a string that says cat fact. Let's give it an empty string over here. And it now becomes cat fact equals to JSON data. Remember, this is a map over here. Now we are going to get the key for the value that we want to get. And from previous class, we know that the key there is fact. So we assign it fact. Then we return a value. Let's say return it as true. Now, once you put a return statement here, your code ends and nothing else runs again. A return statement basically means this whole thing has ended. Once it gets to a return statement, it just returns that value to wherever you are calling it. And of course, our if statements, you must have your else as part of it. So over here we have else return false. Or in this case, you can also, if you feel like it, you can also add, let's say, values, or you can just add in the else block. Or if the backend is sending a particular message, if the status code is not 200, you can use your else block here to actually log that message. Now, in the Vigoplace application, sometimes when you're trying to do something and Baki, you know those times where a user tries to create a profile and they see that red snack bar pop up and it tells them, oh, that they cannot create an account, possibly email has
Yes.
been used.
Okay.
No, you know a scenario whereby the user is trying to use an email that they've already registered with to try to register again. And then they will see an error message that tells them email has already been used.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Or you try to log in with wrong credentials and it tells that your credentials are wrong.
Exactly. Or
Yeah.
sometimes if I want to send money through username and that username is not existing, something like that.
Yes. Now, you see this block of code here. This is what is responsible. Because at that point, if it is not telling me 200 that everything is okay, then the next thing I do is I display the message that is coming from the backend as to why that problem is there. So it is this else part that takes care of it. And also, in some situations, you and your backend engineer might have an understanding of some specific status code. Now, I've worked on some projects in which if the backend returns to me something like, let's say, 407, it means that the person's email is not registered or the person's email has not been confirmed. You know all those email OTP now for email confirmation or validation. With that particular status code, I can now say, okay, this person has not validated their email. Oh yeah, take them to the OTP screen. So the point I'm trying to make is that it does not just end with if it is 200 then else. It can be also else if send.status code is, let's say, 405, you can do something. But at the end of the day, it's always advisable that your else statement gets a message from the back end that tells the user exactly what is wrong. So over here, we have our third one, which is processing. My key keeps processing the response. Over here is also processing, this whole block here is processing the response. And you have your catch here. Now your catch can happen if something in here goes wrong. We already know what try catch does now, so I don't need to go further into that. So you return false for me here. And let's put cat equals to something went wrong. And let's display what went wrong over here. Now this is also processing the response over here. So are we following so far?
Yes.
Baki, what of you? Baki, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, boss. I'm still following.
Okay, 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 okay. So we now know the structure of our network call. Most network calls follows this structure over here. And please remember, always return something for your network call because that tells your program that that network call has reached an end state for it to terminate. Let me just put it there. And all async functions are futures by default. They are of type future. Just like the way I can do like this, let's see, uh, can God, let's just put it like this. If I put this thing like this, by virtue of this quotation mark, we know that this variable here is a string. Abi?
Yes, sir.
Aha. So by virtue of this async keyword over here, this makes this function here a future. Now over here, you can see I have been returning a boolean here. True, false, false, false. Which makes this future return type to be a boolean over here. Now you can decide not to explicitly declare this. Remember, we've also talked about things like this where we said a list that can do a list of that we did something like this. Boy, girl, and we added different things here, Abby. And we also talked about when you can now specifically determine the type, the data type of that list by doing something like this. Let's say, let's make this a string. Now you can see that it's throwing up an error over here because we've explicitly declared that our list must contain only strings. So over here, I've been returning boolean, 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 boolean. But if I don't explicitly declare that it must return a boolean, even if I come here and put 200, it will allow me. But once I explicitly declares here that it's a boolean, it's going to flag this 200 for me. So now I have to change it to true. And the reason why I am making this true, false, 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 we will see the reason in when we are trying to do our optimized way of doing this. So basically, this is the unoptimized way that we are going to make a network call. Now, as I said at the beginning about async functions, they take time. You really do not know how long an async function is going to last. It can last from, let's say, 2 seconds to as long as 40 seconds. You do not know. At that particular point, you would want to give a sort of visual feedback to the user that, oh, okay, something is happening. You can wait while something is happening. Now, imagine a scenario whereby you go to an application and the application tells you to log in. You put in your credentials and you click the login button and you don't see anything. Then suddenly it logs you in. Is that not a bad user experience?
Yes, that's a bad user experience.
That's a bad user experience because it doesn't tell you that something is happening behind the scene for you to wait. Now we are going to tackle that problem of waiting for something to happen. So, and as usual, when you're making a network call, depending on where you want to use it, if your widget tree is based on that your network call, you can easily put it in here. What's the name of this? Make network call. And let me put set states. I doubt set states will work here. Yeah, set states won't work here because, just like I said, once you put a return statement, anything after a return statement will not work because it won't get to that point here. Because once it gets here, it returns a value. So nothing actually gets to this endpoint here. So let's put our set state. Let's put it in a bunch of places. Let's put it here, put it here, and also put it here and here. Now, I'm just going to show you guys what I mean by bad user experience. Let me just create a widget that is a text widget over here so I won't have to repeat myself. And it takes in a string, which is a text, and it returns our text widget for us. So, and I'm just going to put it here, text widget, and cat fact. Okay. Now, once I come into the not optimized, you just see a blank screen. Then suddenly, data appeared. Abi?
Yes, boss.
In no point, if you did not see this code, you will not know that this data is actually being loaded from an API. So let me go back again and back. You just saw white, and suddenly text just appeared from nowhere. Now, this in itself is a bad user experience because there is no indicator to tell people that something is loading that they should wait. So now let's try to fix that. And how are we going to try to fix that? We'll try to fix that using a variable as a sort of controller to tell us when the network call has started and when it has ended. So basically, in that state, your network call has, like I told you before, it has the beginning state, the middle state, and the end state. All these parts here exist within the middle state here. At this point, we're going to be dealing with when it has started and when it has ended. So basically, we are only dealing with two things. And of course, we know our Boolean can only return either true or false. So we are going to use our Boolean data type for this particular situation to handle when our network call has started and when it has ended. You can use any data type that you want to use. Let me put it out there. And I keep saying this thing. In programming, there are several ways you can achieve the same result. But what everyone looks out for is the best way to actually get that result. And let me show you what it means. So let's create a variable called future loading. Let's give it a string called started. This is the initial value over here. So let's create a set state at this beginning called started. We're going to copy this. Now remember what I said about our return over here that tells us that, okay, this has ended. So let's put it here, ended. Just going to copy this ended. You'll see that we are doing a lot of coding over here. Now, this future loading tells us if it has started and if it has ended. Now, we'll come to this, our code over here, and we'll do a little bit of what is to call it, code or widget manipulation. Now, how do we do this? We can do it something like this: future loading. If our future loading is equal to started, I think I have shown you guys something like this now. This question mark and this
Yeah,
column.
yes.
Yeah. If our future loading has started, give us secular progress indicator. Else, give us our text widget here. Let's give this constant and let's go back. You guys know the reason why it's just loading and loading here now, and it's not actually showing this text. Can somebody tell me why it's just constantly in this loading and loading without showing this text here?
I
So
don't
let
know.
Mike, what of you?
Yes, go.
I'm
Go,
trying to
go.
close this. Yeah, this is the whole code here. Let me bring this guy down over there.
What are you doing? What you're doing?
Can you what?
I say, are you done with what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm done with what I'm saying. I asked the question why
You say
this one is just perpetually loading without returning or showing us the data.
already you've initialized it here that you initialized the string that is started already, and in that your if else statement you said if it is loading, let it show this thing. So that
Mhm.
means if it's not loading, that is when it's going to come to that text widget.
Okay, but over here we've declared it ended, ended. So why is it just perpetually loading without coming to this text something here?
Because here now you said future loading is equal to started,
Hmm.
and the up there now the string that you like declared is started.
Hmm.
So it has started already. You did not do like if it has started, show this. If it has ended, show the text widget.
No, it's already here now. If future loading is started, show this. That's why it's showing this one over here.
That is yeah. This is where the thing is. It has not gone to this
Does not
text
come down
widget.
to this one. Although you have the idea as to why, but you're not properly articulating it. Now, the reason is that, remember, our init state, it only runs once. This guy has already run when we're on the screen. So this particular function of it changing our future loading to ended is not being called. That is why it is always loading here. This future loading
Okay.
value is not updated in this function here because we've already called this function here. Now, if I go back now and hit this, it loads and you see you've gotten value. Are we following?
Come again. Come again. Come again.
Okay, okay. Now we have already created this function and we have already called it
You
before.
need to. Mm.
But then we now included a variable to control our loading animation. Then we started assigning values to this our controller here so that when our network call has finished ending, it will update this value here. But because we have already called this one at the beginning and we've not called it again, this value here did not update. That was why it was perpetually on this
Yes.
side of the code. That's why when I went back and I came back in again, you
That
could
is
see
like
that,
basically
yeah.
the meaning of what you said about the init state.
Yes, yes. Now you're seeing how everything connects together because this init state only ran once and that was it.
Yes.
And due to the fact that it only ran once, this our code that we put here did not have any effect until we went outside and we came back in again.
Yes, I understand.
Okay. Now I just want us to take this this text widget here a bit further. Let's call it our result body. Now it's going to return a column for us, and it's going to have two things for us here. The first one will be our text widget, and the second one will be an elevated button. Reload data. No, I'm just going to call make network call again and result body. Okay. Let me text align this. Let me center it. Okay, this looks better. Okay. Now we have, what's the fourth step here? Display responses. So this over here is display responses. This over here will be handling okay. Now we can see how many checks we had to put for this our future loading for us to control when to show the animation and when to show the result, Abi. By doing it here, ended. And the reason, and before I did this string version, I told us that, okay, there are several ways in programming for you to do something. And I used a string here to show that. We can see that our future loading only exists in two forms, started and ended, Abi.
Yes, yes.
So that means it only has two states. And of course, we know Booleans have two states, which is true and false. So in this particular scenario, it is best for you to use a Boolean instead of a string. And the reason for that is that if for some reason you mistakenly did not spell that exact string the right way, let's say here is supposed to be ended and you put end. Let's see what's going to happen. Okay. Did you guys notice what happened here? Okay, I'm thinking instead of ended. Okay, let me make it okay, instead of started, let me put start over here. Did you guys see what happened?
Yes.
You saw it, Abby?
Yes.
Let me go back again. It started with this reload data here, which has this empty string. Then suddenly, this value just popped up. There was no loading animation. And that was because this string here did not match this string here. Now that is why using strings is bad in terms of controlling how your widget looks like. Now, let's say I decided to make this a Boolean instead. This is true already. This is true. Let me just modify all this to be false over here. Yeah, of course, it's going to give me this error because that's already initialized the value. Now, you can see that, let me put, if this is true, then do this. Now, you can see that since this one only exists as a boolean, true or false, if I make a mistake here and type CRU, it's going to flag it.
Yes.
So in other words, using the right data type for your controls makes it easier and less prone errors in your code. I think in advanced classes we are going to talk about using of enums. Now, if you have multiple states, you can have an enum here. Let's call it loading states.
Bros,
We have
boss, I beg, I dey come. I'll join the
okay,
class again, I beg.
okay. We have loading. We have finished. We have failure over here. Now you can use these three loading states, but we are not going to talk about enums today because that one is a whole different thing on its own. This particular one is just simpler and easier to understand. Now you can see the plenty code that we had to write to control the flow of our widget because of this network call. Abi? Now let me
Yeah.
hit it again. Now you can see loading animation and this. Let me go back. Loading animation then this. Now let's get back to what happens if you either encounter an error or a failure and you want to reload your, what is to call it? You want to make that network call again. Mike, in Vigoplace, you know that sometimes when you go to your profile and it's taking long to load,
To load.
then you now see that error message with that button. Then once you tap
Yes.
on it, it loads it again. Then your profile now
Yes.
loads.
Loads. Yeah.
This is the kind of logic that happens here. Now you can see this elevated button here, and we have make network call. So all we have to do is just basically call this function again. Now if I hit it, it calls it again, and it shows us a new data.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can use this logic over here to show or to give the user ability to refresh that page if an error happened or if you want them to get a new data. And to show you an example of getting new data, again in the Vigoplace application, basically everything that we are talking about, you can see how I'm pointing it to a real life scenario within the Vigoplace app. You know, once you enter into your wallet, you now enter your sub wallet and you see your transactions there. At the top right, you see a refresh button.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, at that particular point, you are seeing all your transactions. But let's say somebody, when you are on that screen, somebody now did a transaction, it's not going to pop up there. And you now say, okay, let me refresh this screen again to see. So instead of you going back and coming back in again, which will trigger this function at the init, all you have to do is press that refresh button and it's going to refresh that page. So basically, that is what this button does here, refreshing it. So you see you have a new data here. So I hit again, new data. Hit again, new data. So now this is the unoptimized way of doing this. So now let's go for the optimized way of doing this. It's the same thing. Now notice the things that we had to do. Number one, we had to create a controller for our widget. Now that controller tells us when our network call has started and when it has ended. If for some reason you make a mistake on when it has ended, this thing will just keep loading and loading and loading and loading. And if you also notice, this doesn't take into consideration if there is a failure. Now, let me show you what it means. I'm going to turn off my Wi-Fi for the emulator here, and I come into this place. Okay, now the only reason why it is showing this error over here is that we just specify that if it is not loading, just show the result here,
Nobody.
and we put it here. But you won't even know that this is an error because we typed in something here. Just what I'm trying to say is that this particular method doesn't give you room to explicitly determine which widget will show if an error occurs. Okay, now, Michael, again, in the Vigoplace application now, once you get to your profile screen, you have basically three states. You have your loading screen, you have your screen that displays the data that is gotten from the backend, and you have the third one, which is if an error occurs, which you now say that whoops something. But here in
Yeah,
this one, we only have two here, which is when it's loading and when it's not loading.
it's not loading.
So now inside this place, when it's not loading, we can now do additional, what do they used to call it? Additional computation to know that, okay, is there an error or not? Okay, now let me show you. Now inside this our result body now, we can now take it a step further and do if, okay, so I have this button here that says reload data. Okay, yeah, good. Now we can now do additional computation that now says, okay, if our cat fact, now look at this cat fact now has a string here called something went wrong, Abby.
Yeah.
This to tell us that a failure happened. Now we can come here and say if cat fact dot contains a string called need to put it inside, contains something went wrong, then give it failed network call. What's reloading? What's reloading? Why is this taking so much time? I think this thing has hooked. Okay, I have string is not. I've passed that. I'm just going to close this and rebuild it again. I don't know why it's taking so much time. Each time I turn off the Wi-Fi for this emulator, it always misbehaves. So let me just rebuild the projects. Retrieving. Okay, okay. I think that was
Small. Just wait small. 5 minutes.
mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, it has finished loading. Uh, Let me disconnect my phone. I think my phone is making it have a weird behavior. Failed to connect. How? Let's go to this URL. What's happening? What's happening? Just going to restart you. I restarted emulator. VS Code is still building. What are you building for? Sometimes these things can be very funny. Workshop, okay. Weekly tutors, class apps. We could design. Okay, so let it find my emulator. Okay, that's found it. So let me hit the run. Okay, okay. So, did I close this? Okay, I just minimized it. Okay, loading. It shows us, Abi. Now let's go back and turn off our Wi-Fi. Hit this. You can see now we now have to do extra work to handle when an error happens. Or in fact, let me make it like this. Let me add another. Okay, let me add another side here. Now, if let me put it. Okay, no. Should I do it like this? Okay, if something goes wrong, and let me add another widget here. Let me make this cleaner so that you guys will understand. Because if I put it nested like this, when you're going back to it, it might it might look somehow. So let me return this column children. Aha, I know what I'm going to add here. I'm going to add an image icon. Let's say if error outline. Let's give the size of 30. Let's give it colors of red, and let's give it this our button over here. Okay, so I think we're good to go. Arrow widgets and this. Okay. Oh. Lost connection to device. Very funny. I'm going to. Good thing my laptop doesn't take long to build this thing. If not, we for sleep here. But Mike, you're seeing what I'm trying to do, Abby.
Yes.
I'm just showing you how complex it can be
Can
if you
be, yeah.
decide to use this method over here. I'm going to show you, Sha, so that you will see it. Because when I started, I did this one and nobody told me about Future Builder.
Okay.
So over here, we have when it is good. So over here, we'll have when it is loading and when it is good. Now we come out of here, turn off this guy. Now you can see error here. Failed network call. Now I can hit reload. You can see that flash, that it's flashed at me. Now it's because my data is off. Now let me on this thing back. Connect. Now once I hit reload, it reloads and it gets it.
Okay.
Now you can see from an error state, we're able to recover back to the state that we want.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah. It seems if I turn off and turn on my Wi-Fi on this emulator, it closes, it disconnects from the Flutter thing. So I'm just going to build it again. So this will be displaying. This one will be displaying. It's actually be displaying the response or results. Now this will be handling failures, errors, loading after response, and this will just be under processing, loading. Processing, loading. Okay. Yeah. So for the unoptimized one, we're basically handling when it loads. If an error happens, the error widgets that will show, and if everything goes well, the results body over here, you can see set states here, set states here, set states here, set states here. Basically, set states over here. I will now have a value that we use to check if it has finished loading or not. Now, let's go for the optimized version over here. For this optimized version, I'm still going to make use of this same network call. I'm still going to make use of this same network call. What did they call it again? Network call function. But now I'm going to do away with all the set states. Now, just one other thing that I did not mention. You see this unoptimized way of doing things? You
Yes.
can decide to return a value or not. It doesn't matter here. For this unoptimized way, what matters here is how you control the end of your this particular one here. How you control when your animation shows and when it does not show. So let me just remove all these return statements over here. So this one does not return a boolean at all. Let me just remove all these errors here. No string to
Oh,
cat front. I know you're getting tired.
I see. I just
Don't
want to
worry.
sleep.
This will be the last thing to show you. And yeah, we are going to finish this one though. We are not going to stop halfway. Okay, and I'm going to delete all of these guys over here. And I'm going to delete you too. This is your column.
There's no need for the column.
Yeah, there's no need for the column at this point. I'm going to pass in a future build. I'm going to make here, make network one over here. Okay. Now, we are still going to go back to the not optimized network code. Now, once I hit it here, you can see that even without the return statement here, this one works. Because it is not the return statement that controls your widget's visibility. It is this feature loading here that controls which widget is to show over here.
Okay.
But now for this optimized one, since we are using a feature builder, it is your return statement that actually controls which widgets to show here. So now let me
Okay.
show you future builder over here. Now let's see what a future builder says. Create a widget. Okay. Create a widget that builds itself based on the latest snapshot of interaction with a future. Okay. And from the previous class, when I was explaining it, we have a feature builder and it takes in two parameters. it takes in our future, which we have declared here. We've already talked about what the future is, and we've already declared that it returns a boolean for us. Then we have our builder. Is back in on this call.
Ah, he just went out of.
Oh. Now we have a builder here, which is the second parameter that let's takes in a function. Now this function takes in two values and it returns a widget though. Don't forget this one. Though. It takes in two values and returns a widget. It takes in a build context and it takes in a snapshot. And just like I told you before, this our snapshot type. Our snapshot type, which is showing boolean,
Yeah.
is always the same as our future return type here. Boolean here. Snapshot boolean here. If I come here and change here to int, to integer. If I come here, it shows integer.
Int.
If I come here, it will show int. So basically, this your snapshot return type is based on your return type of this your future here. Now, if I remove return type here, here becomes dynamic. Because if you don't specify anything, it's automatically dynamic.
Yeah.
Now, come here, dynamic, come here, dynamic. You're seeing the relationship between your future and your snapshot, Abi?
Snapshot. Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, I'm going to go back and make this a boolean because I prefer using booleans for my future. Because your future, usually, from what I've experienced, your future can only be in two sides. It's either when it's loading or when it has
It's not
returned. Yeah, or when it is not loading. Although you can also make it three sharp for when it's loading and for when it has gotten data and when error data has happened. But now I'll show you the beauty of a future loader. Because you see that when it is loading something, this future builder already has an inbuilt function within it to tell you when your future is still loading. So you yourself, you don't need to bother about doing this thing, this particular one, to tell you that your future is still loading and this to tell you that your future has ended. Now, how do we do that? Now, the first thing we'll do is use our conditional statement. Now, if snapshot dot connection state, the connection state of our snapshot equals to connection state dot, let's put waiting or let's put not done. If it is not done, okay, let's put it as waiting. Let's see what waiting does. Connected to an asynchronous computation and awaiting interaction. Let's look at others. Done says connected to a terminated asynchronous computation. So now let's say if our connection states like this, what is basically, we know what this means and this double equal to sign now. If this value is the same as this value.
Yes.
Now, we are going to say if our connection state is not done, that is if it is still loading. Now, we are going to return a circle progress indicator. But hold up, this guy is still telling us that there's an error over here. Oh. Remember, our builder must return a widget. And what do we know about our if-else statement? Your if-else statement cannot be complete if there is no else, especially if you are returning something in that your function. Now, let's look at it. Bool, return bool. Now, let's give it a boolean value of is true, just to show you just a miniature way of what this means. Now we give it a value of true. Now if is true equals to true, you can either type it like this or you can just put it like this. Either way is fine. You can do return true here. But you can see this guy is telling us that the body might complete normally, causing null to be returned. But the return type boolean is a potentially null. Basically, it's telling us that this our statement here is not correct. Now, because it's now saying that okay, what if in a situation whereby it's true is not true? What does it
It's
do?
not.
It does not return anything here, and we've already declared that it must return a boolean. That is why it is telling us that this thing is not complete over here. But if you go else, return false, you can see that, yeah, it's telling us that now it's good to go, it's complete. So that's the same
Yes.
thing that is happening over here. Our builder expects a widget to be returned in the function. We've already done our if side. So we need an else side. So if we do else return, let's say a container, you can see that it is all good now.
Yes.
But now we're going to take this whole thing a step further and check. Remember, our snapshot here says that it has a return type of boolean, Abi.
Yes.
Now we can now do like, okay, else if our snapshot dot data equals true, return. I'm going to tiff this widget over here, this results body. Okay, I'm just going to steal these widgets over here. Let me rebuild this one. Okay. Now, true, it returns our result body. I think, okay, so shouldn't be here. And our else returns our error body over here. Now, let me explain what is happening over here. You see this return that you put over here? You see this return statement that is over here? Now,
Yes.
once you return in this your future builder here, whatever data you return is being stored inside your snapshot dot data. So if you want to access the returned value in here, it will be snapshot dot data. Now, if your return type here is an integer, if you come down here, you can see that it's already telling us there's a problem. The type of the right operand bool isn't a subtype or blah blah integer. Basically, this boolean here does not match this integer. So I can put 200 here. That is if you want your return type here to be integer, and you not like, okay, if it's 200 here, return 200 for me. If it's 405, return 405 for me. Else, you can put a number that you want here. There are a bunch of things you can do with this return data type. I'm just showing you the possibilities of it.
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's enter our optimized one here. You can see it, Abi.
Yes.
Let's centralize this whole, let's make this guy center.
You there you
Okay,
go.
you can see it, Abi. Now, with this particular one, you can see that we are not calling any set states anywhere up and down the place. Numbers, okay, let me just keep that numbers up. Mike and Baki, I don't know if Baki will be able to follow, but you can see that we are not calling First of all, there is no value that we are using to control how our widgets will be displayed. We are not calling any set state here. The only thing we are using is our future builder. We put our future, we check if it is not done. If it is not done, keep rolling for us. Now, if you are done and our return type, our return value is true, show us our good results. If it is not, show us our error. So let me go back and turn off my data here and come into optimize. You can see failed network call. I hit it again, it still failed. So Mike, you can actually see that we did not need to come here and do this additional contains something,
Yes,
blah
yes,
blah blah
yes,
blah
yes,
blah,
yes.
because it just fell into this our catch place here. Okay, let me even put the log. Um, Error network catch. Okay, this thing is going to happen again. Oh my god. Why do I keep forgetting? So Mike and Baki, you can see that this one is much more cleaner to use.
Yes, this one is not cleaner.
It's much cleaner instead of having you to do all these ones that if you make a single mistake, you will start finding where the problem is. Just look at set state, set state, set state, set state. You have this value here, you are giving it this value. You will start tracking when you are supposed to give it the value, which value you are supposed to give it to. Meanwhile, this one is just simple. If it's 200, return true. That is, this thing actually returned correctly. Or else return false, false, false. And if it is true, give me my body. If it is false, then this one. So optimized gives me my value. Even not optimized, give me. You can see that both of them returns value for you and they look like they are doing the same thing.
Yes.
In fact, they are doing the same thing. But one method is better than the other method. Okay. And also, there's one thing that you should know about futures. Now, I don't know if you noticed it. Each time I hot reload, my future loads back again. Abi?
Yes.
And we did not use, in fact, let me even remove init. Let me remove my init from here. Let me remove init completely. If I come here, you can see that even without init, in the optimized one, it is working, Abi?
It's working. Yes.
Yeah. Now, that's because when our widget tree, remember, each time you do hot reload, this function is being called again. Oh. Let's not forget. So when this function is being called, it calls this our future build. And when it calls our future build, it calls this function again. That is why
Yes.
it is reloading. Now, let's say you have, what's the word again? Let's say you now have a widget here. Let's call that, okay, let's say you now have a widget, which is a button. And that button is supposed to call set state. You remember our counter int, counter. Let's call text. Remember that the normal Flutter app now, where the beginning, the default project is a counter app.
Yes.
Where once you tap a button, it sets states and it increases the counter by one. Eh. Increase count. Now, let's say there's a scenario whereby you would have to call set states after this thing has finished loading to, let's say, update the UI of one particular site. Now let's hit increase here. You can see that I want this one to increase, but the whole of my future is rebuilding and calling the API again. You can see that that is a problem, Abi.
Yes.
Now, how do we solve that? To solve it is quite easy and straightforward. At this point of our future, we are not going to pass this function directly inside our future. Because once you call a function, or rather, once you pass a function like this inside a, let's say, a button or whatever parameter that takes in a function. Okay, I'm talking too much. Let me just show you an example here. We have this our make network call, Abby, as a function. You know, inside this compressed, we put it like this. We can also put it like this. It will still work. But now, if we put it like this, it's going to throw an error for us. And the reason for that is that you cannot, if you declare a function like this, that means each time set state is being called, that function will be called. Now, we are trying to prevent this future from being called each time set state is being called. And this is how we are going to do it. We are going to create a variable here. It's going to be a late type future of return type boolean. And let's call it future net. Now, are you guys following? Mike, Baki? This side is a bit complex or technical. Okay, now let me go back again. If I come to my optimized network here, if I want to call set state, it reloads my future builder.
Yeah.
That is not what I want. I want a solution whereby once I click to increase my count, it does not call my future builder again.
Okay. Only the count, you just count.
Only the count should just increase. Set state as a function, once you hit it, it rebuilds the whole widget tree here. And by rebuilding the whole widget tree, it calls this function here. That is why our future builder is rebuilding and rebuilding each time it hits
Okay,
increase
but
counter.
now, can we propose init state to solve the problem?
Okay, how do you want to use init state to solve the problem?
No, I'm just asking, like, because from how we understand init state that maybe if there's a particular part of the screen you don't want to like load, maybe this one may handle it first before the next one, something like that.
No, that's
No,
not. That's not. I'm going to show you how we are going to solve it. And it will involve init state, but you are just saying init state without telling me what exactly you use the init state for. Now, over here, we have our init state here. But remember, we have already created a value here. What we are going to do is that we are going to save this, our network call, inside this value here. So it will now be future net equals to make network call. Now, once we have initialized this our future net here, basically what this means is that whatever computation is happening here will be saved inside here. Now, instead of calling this our function directly, we are just going to call this variable here. Of course, this is going to throw up error at this point. So we'll have to go back and come back in again. Now, once I come back in again, it loads normally. I hit increase counter. My increase counter is increasing, but it is not reloading. You're seeing it, Abi?
Yes.
That's because this value here has already been saved in here. So no matter how many times you call your set state to rebuild your widget tree, it's not going to call this again. This right here is not a function. This is not a function. This future net here is not a function. That is why it is not reloading and reloading and reloading. Now, if we now come down here and we now want to reload our, what is to call it again? Our future builder, all we have to do is call these two again inside a set state. So let me put this same guy inside here. Hit reload, it reloads, hit reload, it reloads, hit increase counter, it does not affect. Hit reload, it reloads, hit reload, it reloads. So that's just it about using future builder. At this particular point, I assure you it is overwhelming, and yeah, let's just leave it at that. It is overwhelming. You'll have to practice, practice, and the more you practice and fail at using future builder, the more you understand how it works. Let me show you an example of how complex a future builder can be. Here is our login screen. Alright. Let me just sign in. Okay, I finally found our login screen. Okay, so okay, this one is quite straightforward. In fact, let me open a one that I know that is quite complex for a future builder, that you have lots of if else within it. Now, this right here is my future. Look at it here, future builder. If it's not done, you are loading. Now you can see here I used a string as my return type. So if my snapshots data is dashboard, it takes them to dashboard. If it is email, it takes them to email verification. If it is PIN, that means they've not created their PIN. It takes them to go and create PIN. If they've not authorized their device, then it takes them to go and authorize their device. And you can see here my future is just a future here. See, it is over here. I declared it over here. And one of the main reasons why, okay, and one of the main reasons why you do not also passing a function directly into your future is that Flutter, let me just give you guys heads up about Flutter and keyboard. Flutter has a weird behavior or relationship when it comes to keyboard on your screen. Now, once your keyboard comes up on your screen, for some reason, it calls a build function. It rebuilds that screen. So if you pass this function inside here, and let's say a text box is here, once you tap that text box, it's going to, once that keyboard comes up, it's going to rebuild that screen. So I want you guys to actually test this with your real device. And the widget that you will use is your text form field. Let me type it for you here. Text form field. This is it over here. It allows you to type. So you will put in this your future here. You call the make network call and you put your keyboard. Let's see if I can call my keyboard over here. How do I show my keyboard? Does anyone know how I can show my keyboard with this thing?
No, I don't have idea.
Cloud, let's see. It's an emulator. I can't. Oh, well, I'll leave you guys to try that one out. This your future will be calling the function directly. Then put your text field here and try to type something inside your text field and let's see the behavior that will happen. Then you will understand why you shouldn't put your function inside your future. So yeah, at this particular point, I guess you guys are overwhelmed, Abby.
I swear.
So you would have now you have two assignments. Assignment one is use passing a function directly into the future of the future builder and see the behavior when when the keyboard comes up, comparing it to when you assign a variable holding the function. When you assign a variable holding the function and passing it into the future of the future builder instead. That's one. Two, you will use this to make sure you guys understand how network calls and work. Use this API to make a network call and display the results to be a name, addresses, profile, picture. You can use whatever design you choose. Okay, so this will be today's class assignment here. Okay, so is there any question? Baki, Mike, questions? Baki, Mike, questions? Can you guys hear me?
No, I don't have a question, bro.
Mike, do you have questions?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, I'm going to make the video available with the code so you can study the code out. And also, yeah, in fact, let's give this 100. In fact, let's make it a 1000. I want to test out something. Let's see. Let's see if it's going to return. Okay, it's returned 1000. Okay, yeah. So I'm guessing. Yes. And displays the results. And extra marks if you can redirect the website the person when you select the person. Okay, so I'm guessing that's the end of today's class. So see you guys next week. So next week we'll just be dealing with this assignment here.
Sir.
Hmm?
Thank you, sir.
You already sound tired. Well now, see you guys later. Bye.